Hello and welcome to this News9 special. Today's show has been designed by Paul Moll. We continue to bring you the latest updates on the Israel-Hamas conflict. Today, in fact, marks about 15th day of that Hamas attack that was carried on southern Israel, killing almost 1,400 people and the kidnap of 200 Israeli citizens as hostages. Here's the latest update that we get you from the war zone on day 15. In the latest update, what we understand is that Hamas has released 2 American captives who were held in Gaza. The terrorist organization had said that it is open to releasing more captives from its captivity and also to ensure that civilians are not harmed on both the sides. Meanwhile, bombings have persisted in the besieged Gaza Strip, where several Hamas terrorists have sought shelter. Regarding the death toll, as of now, what we understand is that 4,200 people have been killed in Gaza, while 13,000 have been injured. Meanwhile, people of Gaza still await relief materials, even though Israel's government said it will allow humanitarian aid to enter Gaza from Egypt. US President Joe Biden has requested over $105 billion from Congress. This is to provide security assistance for the ongoing wars in Ukraine as well as towards Israel. Meanwhile, Benjamin Netanyahu has also said that it is one of the darkest hours that he is in fact facing. And Iraq, which is being closer to Israel, the warning being sent out to the US military. Some of the militia groups in that region have said that US should vacate areas in Iraq. Meanwhile, the Islamist group Hamas has released 2 US hostages, a mother and daughter duo, Judith and Natalie Ranan, who were kidnapped in its attack on Israel. A Hamas spokesperson said that the decision was for humanitarian reasons and to prove that claims made by US President Joe Biden is false. Let's listen into the story.
The Islamist group Hamas has freed 2 American hostages, a mother and a daughter, the first known hostage release in the war between it and Israel. Israel's military spokesperson said Judith and Natalie Rana were kidnapped during Hamas's surprise attack on Israel on October 7th, and that they were received on the border by Israeli forces. The International Committee of the Red Cross says it transported them through Gaza. The Hamas attacks in Israel killed 1,400 people. Around 200 were taken as hostages. Hamas says the mother and daughter were released for humanitarian reasons and, quote, to prove to the American people and the world that claims made by Biden and his fascist administration are false. They also say that the hostage release came from negotiations by the government of Qatar. This was U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken.
We expect a team from the U.S. Embassy to see them very shortly. Over the coming hours, they'll receive any support and assistance that they need. The urgent work to free every single American, to free all other hostages, continues, as does our work to secure the safe passage out of Gaza for the Americans who are trapped there. In this particular instance, I want to thank the government of Qatar for their very important assistance.
Meanwhile, Israeli airstrikes continue to pound Gaza now 2 weeks after the Hamas attacks and have killed over 4,000 people. Hamas has said about 20 of its hostages were previously killed in airstrikes, without giving details. It also says a further 50 hostages are being held by other militant groups.
Meanwhile, a group of humanitarian workers gathered at the Rafah border crossing in Egypt. Now they were getting ready to deliver essential aid supplies to the war-hit Palestinians. We have a report on this. Take a look.
Dozens of volunteers waiting and wondering at the usual. Their leaders are giving them instructions on what to do and how important is their mission to saving lives. Who work for the National Coalition of Charity Organizations. They have collected thousands of tons of humanitarian assistance for the desperate people of Gaza.
Our mission is to deliver aid to our brothers in Palestine. Our goal is to stay here until all humanitarian aid is delivered. We're determined to supply all the assistance to the Palestinians who are suffering so much.
Volunteers are joined by truck drivers at the borders. The drivers have been here for nearly a week in this desert area, eating, sleeping, spending time, or even chanting for Palestinians.
The explosion at the hospital, we felt it here. It shook our trucks while we were inside. We were very far away from the hospital, but our trucks nearly flipped over from the strength of the explosion. It was shocking. We started running away from here.
Gets frustrated every time he hears of people dying from a lack of medicine, when all they need is right there in his truck, parked up for days.
Children are dying here, and people injured can't get the treatment they need.
It's a feeling shared by many of his colleagues. There is talk that the border could open very soon, but for now they hold tight and wait. There's little else they can do, even though they know that every hour that passes
Meanwhile, protesters from Jakarta to Tunis demanded an end to Israel's bombardment of Gaza after nearly 2 weeks of intense air and artillery strikes that authorities there say have killed more than 4,000 people. Let's take a look at this report coming in on the protests against Israel from across the Arab and Muslim world.
From thousands hitting the streets in Yemen to a sea of flags in Iran, and a burning effigy of Israel's prime minister, and symbolic funeral prayers for Palestinians in Turkey. Muslims around the world protested on Friday, demanding an end to Israel's bombardment of Gaza. I have an overwhelming feeling, says this woman in Cairo. Gaza's pain is our pain. Nearly 6,000 protesters turned out in Jordan, where much of the population has Palestinian heritage. They called for the bombing to end and voiced support for Hamas, urging it to attack Israel with rocket strikes and suicide bombers. For nearly 2 weeks, Israel has been pummeling the enclave with intense strikes that authorities there say have killed more than 4,000 people. It's also ramping up for a ground war aimed at eradicating Hamas. The group rampaged into Israeli towns on October 7th, killing 1,400 people and taking hostages. While some Western governments have thrown their support behind Israel's military campaign, many Muslim states have called for an immediate ceasefire. In Cairo, thousands gathered at one of the oldest mosques in the world. This protest at Al-Azhar is just a microcosm of Egypt. It is just a show of unity with them, this man says of Palestinians. A driving force for many protesters, they say, was Tuesday's blast at a Gaza hospital, which authorities there said killed hundreds of people. Hamas says Israel was responsible for the blast. Israel blames a failed rocket launch by a Palestinian group.
Meanwhile, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres visited the Rafah crossing, where he aimed to expedite the delivery of crucial aid to the besieged Palestinian enclave of Gaza. This visit comes as Gaza faces severe shortages of essential resources. The Rafah crossing, controlled by Egypt and only one not bordering Israel, has become a crucial point of focus in the light of the recent conflict between Israel and the Hamas terrorist group. The United Nations is actively engaged in discussions with all involved parties to facilitate the much-needed humanitarian aid operation.
Touching down in Egypt, United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres visited the Rafah crossing on Friday. His mission to get aid trucks queued at the border into the besieged Palestinian enclave of Gaza as quickly as possible.
We have seen so many trucks loaded with water, with fuel, with medicines, with food. Exactly the same thing that are needed on this side of the wall. So these trucks are not just trucks. They are a lifeline. They are the difference between life and death for so many people in Gaza.
He called for a meaningful number to enter every day and for verification checks to be done in a way that is practical and expedited. The only crossing with Gaza that does not border Israel has become a critical point since Israel began its mass bombing of the Strip in retaliation for a deadly assault by the Hamas militant group on Israel. But with Gaza running low on vital resources, the Egyptian-controlled border has remained shut, while various parties wrangle over terms for allowing aid to flow in. The UN Humanitarian Office said it was in advanced talks with all parties in the Israel-Hamas conflict to ensure an aid operation can soon get underway. The United States said an agreement had been reached for the passage of the first 20 trucks, but that details of a deal to send aid was still being hammered out. Hamas said in a statement the US is misleading the public opinion. Israel wants Hamas to release the hostages it took during its attack before aid can enter, but only if it does not end up in the hands of the group. Before the conflict, about 450 trucks were arriving in Gaza daily to aid most of the Strip's 2.3 million people.
Meanwhile, the White House has proposed to bolster aid to Israel as well as to Ukraine. The total cost of the supplemental funding request was pegged at just over $105 billion. President Joe Biden hopes Congress will move urgently on the legislation, and he made the case for defending U.S. support for its allies during a rare Oval Office address.
In what was only his second ever speech from the Oval Office, U.S. President Joe Biden on Thursday made his case to Americans that tens of billions in wartime aid should be sent to Israel and Ukraine, while also linking Hamas to Russian President Vladimir Putin.
American leadership is what holds the world together. American alliances are what keep us, America, safe. Hamas and Putin represent different threats, but they share this in common. They both want to completely annihilate a neighboring democracy, completely annihilate it.
A source familiar with Biden's plan told Reuters he will ask for $100 billion in new spending, including $60 billion for Ukraine and $14 billion for Israel. The remainder will be split between Asia, U.S. border security, and humanitarian aid. He spoke from the Oval Office less than 24 hours after returning from a whirlwind trip to Israel, meant to show U.S. solidarity after the attack by Hamas militants around 2 weeks ago that killed 1,400 Israelis. Biden acknowledged that Americans were asking why U.S. support matters in these wars. He framed his pitch as a necessary cost.
To support our critical partners, including Israel and Ukraine, is a smart investment that's going to pay dividends for American security for generations. Help us keep American troops out of harm's way. Help us build a world that is safer, more peaceful, more prosperous for our children and grandchildren.
Hours after the speech, Russia's foreign ministry fired back, saying on Telegram that Biden's comment calling the aid request an investment showed Washington benefits from proxy wars rather than fighting for ideas. Biden's comments come with some urgency. Israel is gearing up for a ground offensive in the Gaza Strip, and tensions are at a fever pitch after a deadly blast at a Gaza hospital. Biden said in his speech that Israel was not responsible, as Hamas officials have maintained. But as global protests grow over the hospital strike, he urged Israel not to, quote, give into blind rage, and recognize the need to supply humanitarian aid to Palestinians caught in the crossfire in Gaza.
Yesterday, in discussions with the leaders of Israel and Egypt, I secured an agreement for the first shipment of humanitarian assistance from the United Nations to Palestinian civilians in Gaza. As I said in Israel, as hard as it is, we cannot give up on peace. We cannot give up on a two-state solution.
Biden's spending request comes at a time of political chaos in Washington. The Republicans who control the House of Representatives have failed to unite behind a new speaker after ousting Kevin McCarthy from the job early this month. The funding measure, which must pass both the Democratic-led U.S. Senate and Republican-controlled but currently leaderless House, will test whether Republican lawmakers can be persuaded to set aside their opposition and approve the new spending.
My colleague Manish is in Hebron, where he's at the cave of the patriarchs of Abraham, Isaac and Jacob. Now, a scholar explains the importance of the cave of the patriarchs and why there are claims and counterclaims on this religious site from both Israeli Jews as well as from Palestinian Muslims. Take a look.
यहाँ पर तो मुझे बताया गया कि संभल के रहिएगा, गोली कभी भी चला सकते हैं, उधर से भी गोली आ सकती है और सिक्योरिटी वाले ने कहा कि हो सकती है कि हमारी भी गोली आपको लग जाए, इसलिए संभल कर रहिएगा। तो कुल मिलाकर यह है कि इस टेरिटरी पे आने के बाद सबसे पहले मुझे यही बताया गया कि आप जहां पर भी हैं उस जगह पर कभी भी गोली चल सकती है। ये हालात है। देखिए, बीते 24 घंटे का संघर्ष हमने देखा है। बीते 24 घंटे में हमने देखा है कि कैसे सिक्योरिटी फोर्सेस और यहाँ के लोग एक दूसरे के साथ टकरा रहे थे। लगातार अचानक कुछ ही मिनट के अंदर हजारों की संख्या में लोग बाहर आ जाते हैं। मैं इस वक्त आपको उस पूरे इलाके में भी दिखाता हूं, बल्कि अगर मैं कहूं तो यह भी गलत नहीं होगा कि पूरे इस आबादी के बीच में जो सबसे सेफ प्लेस है, वो सेफ प्लेस में मुझे सिक्योरिटी पर्सन्स ने लाकर भेजा कि आप यहां खड़े होकर बात करिए, ताकि कहीं से भी अगर गोली वगैरह आए तो आप यहां पर सुरक्षित रह सके। देखिए, पूरा जो इलाका है ये वेस्ट बैंक का वो इलाका है, फिलिस्तीनियों का वो इलाका है जहां पर कि हमें तुरंत ही गाजा पट्टी पर हुए हमले का असर तुरंत दिखता है। अस्पताल पर हुए हमले के बाद से तो यहाँ का माहौल बेहद तनावपूर्ण है। मुझे हमेशा ऐसा लग रहा है जैसे ये पूरा जेल का एक इलाका है, और जबकि यहूदियों के लिए ये सबसे पवित्र स्थलों में से एक है। लेकिन वेस्ट बैंक के इस इलाके में आकर साफ तौर पर एहसास होता है कि तनाव कितना चरम पर है। राइट नाउ आई एम इन हेब्रॉन एंड आई एम ज्वाइनिंग विथ मिखाइल एंड ही विल एक्सप्लेन अस वेयर वी आर and how the situation right now here. So Mikhail, thank you so much for talking to us, and please explain me where we are first.
We are in Hebron. Hebron is one of the second holiest cities in Israel. Hebron goes back, mentioned in the Bible, if I'm not mistaken, over 40 times. It is the burial place or the resting place of the forefathers of the founders of the Jewish nation, Abraham, Isaac and Jacob, who we mention 3 times a day in our prayers. They are buried here, but we don't see this place just as a burial place, because if you come here on a Jewish holiday, where everybody in the world goes on a holiday to a resort or a hotel or something, you'll find many people coming here happily, dancing with music. It's a place of life, because we draw from them the ability to continue in what we are supposed to do in this world, which is to bring light to the world.
So when I was coming to this area, I saw like lots of territory or lots of houses by the Arabs. So does it mean that the whole area is surrounded by the Arab, and in between this is the place, a very religious and holy place for Hebrew?
Well, not necessarily, because there are other places, neighborhoods, Jewish places, communities which live on the road. If you came here 200 years ago, if you read the writings of Mark Twain or Tristram, who was a Christian priest who traveled the land in the 18th, middle of the 18th, end of the 18th century, you would find a desolate, barren land with almost no people living here. The land was, I would say, gives out its gift to the world and to the Jewish people. Since the Jewish people came back to the land is smiling at us. And you know, when a place becomes attractive and good, then it draws people from all around. So you would find probably a very small Arab population all the way from Jerusalem to Hebron, if we go back not a long time ago.
Since you mentioned about the land, so when I was going through, I was reading that this territory is owned by so many rulers, and right now it is, since it is in West Bank, so it is under the control of Palestine Authority, or what?
Well, I tend to object to the word Palestine, not because Palestine is not a word which we would use. The Jews never left the land of Israel. The land of Israel is a godly given land to the Jewish people. We don't have a right to the land, we have an obligation to the land. To us, the Bible, we are strongly connected to, otherwise we would have gone to Uganda or somewhere else, is not a history book. It's a book which tells us how the world is supposed to function correctly, for the world to become a place of light and not darkness. And therefore we have an obligation. A person cannot turn to his God and say to him, very nice, you know, there are so many commandments, I'll keep them all, but coming back to the land is something I will give up on. Every one of us who came from outside of Israel could probably have lived a very comfortable life somewhere else in the world where they were born or where they would possibly emigrate to. So we come back to the land in order to bring redemption to the world. And therefore, Jewish people are connected to their forefathers, we're connected to the land itself, and anybody who wants to join us and create, I would say, positivity in this part of the world is welcome to. Anybody who wants to destroy us or hurt us, then unfortunately evil has to be defeated to the end.
Well, outspoken conservative Jim Jordan sought more time to bolster his faltering bid for the top job in the U.S. House of Representatives after losing a second vote, while his fellow Republicans considered a backup option for the leaderless chamber.
I told the conference it was an honor to be there, Speaker designee.
But hardline conservative Jim Jordan is no longer that. His pursuit of becoming the Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives ended on Friday after a third failed vote on the House floor.
A Speaker has not been elected.
Republicans then voted 112-86 to revoke Jordan's nomination in a closed-door meeting.
I told the conference that I appreciated getting to work with everyone, talk with everyone. I got to know members in our conference that I didn't really know that well over the last 3 weeks, and that we need to come together and figure out who our speaker is going to be. I'm going to work as hard as I can to help that individual so that we can go help the American people.
Support for Jordan's bid faded this week as the Ohio Republican got less votes on Friday than he did on Tuesday.
200 votes.
Well short of the majority he needed to claim the speaker's gavel. But it remains unclear who Republicans might throw their support behind next. Lawmaker Kevin McCarthy, who was ousted as Speaker by a small faction of his fellow Republicans nearly 3 weeks ago, said the party is in need of repair.
Jim is no longer going to be the nominee. We'll have to go back to the drawing board. What history will look at, the Crazy Eights led by Gates, the amount of damage they have done to this party and to this country is insurmountable.
The chamber remains leaderless and, as of now, is unable to respond to President Joe Biden's request for aid to Ukraine and Israel. But could next week be a game changer?
Hi, everybody.
Here's Acting House Speaker Patrick McHenry, who at one point this week was considered to be given more authority until Republicans ultimately rejected that temporary backup plan.
House Republicans will return on Monday at 6:30 p.m. for a candidate forum, followed by an election process on Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. The reason why I made that decision is we need space and time for candidates to talk to other members.
Republicans Austin Scott and Kevin Hern said they would try for the Speaker's job, and Jody Arrington said he would make a decision by Sunday.
Moving on, China's new restrictions on graphite exports are sending ripples through the electric vehicle market in Beijing. Now, it has been said that Beijing's decision aimed at safeguarding national security could significantly impact EV manufacturers. China, a major player in refining graphite for EV batteries, now demands export permits, raising concerns of supply shortages. Analysts suggest South Korean firms in particular could face challenges due to the heavy reliance on Chinese imports. Automakers are scrambling to secure supplies from other sources, but the looming changes could pose a huge threat, and it could also result in a cost burden and potential shortages in the industry. Let's dive into the full story and listen in.
New restrictions announced in China could be unwelcome news for the growing electric vehicle market. Beijing said on Friday it will require export permits for some graphite products to protect national security. It's the latest move by the country to control supplies of critical minerals in response to challenges over its global manufacturing dominance. The reason this might hurt EV makers is because China refines more than 90% of the world's graphite into the material used in virtually all EV battery anodes. That's the negatively charged portion of a battery. One analyst said South Korean firms heavily rely on the graphite imports from China, but would have to look elsewhere to the US or Australia, and that would likely raise the cost burden for many. Automakers are now racing to lock in supplies from outside China, but there could be shortages. China will now require, as of December, that exporters apply for permits to ship two types of graphite. Beijing said the move was conducive to ensuring the security and stability of the global supply chain and safeguarding national security. China's decision comes while the EU considers tariffs on Chinese-made EVs, which it argues unfairly benefit from subsidies. The US government also widened curbs on Chinese companies' access to semiconductors earlier this week. Analysts said it was not clear how much impact the new measures on graphite will have in the short term. But on Friday, shares in China's new energy vehicle and battery makers rose after the announcement.
Ukraine is desperately short of judges and is kick-starting a nationwide hiring spree to fill more than 2,000 vacancies and vet around as many sitting judges for potential misconduct. Let's take a look at this report.
A judge in Kiev, typically handles dozens of administrative cases and several criminal hearings a day. And she knows others who are even busier. Not only is Ukraine at war, but it's also desperately short of judges and on a long-awaited hiring spree to fill more than 2,000 vacancies. Cementing the rule of law is crucial to Ukraine's ambitions to join the European Union.
The amount of material that I have to work with that fills my head each day is too much. Working with all this overload is very difficult. When we come to work, we cannot even imagine how many air raid alerts there will be and which bomb shelters we will have to run to.
Since the 2014 revolution toppled a pro-Moscow president, Ukraine has charted a pro-Western course and embarked on reforms. But they've met systemic resistance, watchdogs say. A vast backlog of cases has delayed justice for many people. Two bodies responsible for hiring and disciplining judges were effectively frozen for years and only recently relaunched under EU pressure. War has brought a new burden. About 100,000 alleged Russian crimes under investigation. District Court Judge Yulia Ivanina says only about 40 have so far been sent to the courts.
Considering that 100,000 war crimes have already been registered, just think how many new cases will be sent to courts. Even if all the vacancies are filled, all the hiring is done, the workload will still be enormous.
On top of hiring new ones, Ukraine must vet 2,000 or so sitting judges for misconduct. Endemic corruption means few Ukrainians trust the courts. High-profile scandals include the recent arrest of the former head of the Supreme Court. He denies taking a $2.7 million bribe. Making sure appointees are politically independent is another tough task. Ludmila Volkova is on the commission tasked with both new hires and integrity checks.
Those who keep their posts, whose competence we confirm, will shape the new era of judicial power in Ukraine.
The judiciary overhaul is part of a broader crackdown on corruption. A survey in July found 89% of Ukrainians see corruption as the most serious problem facing their country, apart from the war. Tens of thousands of Ukrainians have died to defend their fragile democracy, and experts say tolerance of official abuse has worn thin.
Meanwhile, Russia has also detained a journalist of a US-funded Radio Free Europe for failing to register as a foreign agent while visiting for a family emergency. Take a look.
Alsu Kamasheva, an editor at US-funded Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, has been detained by Russia. That's according to the broadcaster. RFE said the detention was for failing to register as a foreign agent while visiting Russia for a family emergency. Kamasheva, an editor with Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty's Tatar Bashkir service, holds both US and Russian passports. Russia has tightened its control over the media since the start of the Ukraine war. Leading independent news outlets have closed, and many journalists and publications designated as so-called foreign agents. The term, which carries Cold War connotations of espionage, is used in Russia to label organizations, journalists, activists and celebrities deemed to be engaging in political activity with foreign support. After the war and the arrest of Wall Street Journal correspondent Evan Gershkovich in March on spying charges, almost all US journalists have left the country. The State Department repeatedly urged US citizens to leave Russia. Kamasheva travelled to Russia on May 20th. As she sought to leave Russia at the end of her trip at Kazan airport, she was detained and her passports were confiscated as she awaited her return flight. She was fined for failing to register her US passport with Russian authorities. In a statement, RFE's acting president Jeffrey Gedmin said, "Alsu is a highly respected colleague, devoted wife and dedicated mother to 2 children. She needs to be released so she can return to her family immediately." Russia's Tatar Inform news agency said Kamasheva had failed to register as a foreign agent while gathering information on Russia's military activity. She could face up to 5 years in prison, according to RFE. The Russian government has yet to comment.
Oscar winner George Clooney and other top Hollywood stars have offered $150 million to the SAG-AFTRA Actors Union as part of a proposal to end the actors' strike as it nears the 100th day. Now, the offer could provide the union an extra $150 million over 3 years and could help fund improved health benefits. Take a look.
Actor George Clooney and other top Hollywood stars have offered $150 million to the SAG-AFTRA Actors Union as part of a proposal to end a strike that has lasted almost 100 days. Clooney's spokesperson confirmed the offer on Thursday, saying the money given the union over the next 3 years could help fund improved health benefits. Having better health benefits has been one of the union's demands during negotiations with major studios like Netflix and Warner Brothers. The entertainment news site Deadline first reported the story, citing Clooney as saying that, quote, "a lot of top earners want to be part of the solution." He also said top stars would only collect residuals once lower-paid actors received theirs. A SAG-AFTRA spokesperson didn't immediately respond to a request for comment. Clooney's remarks come after talks between the union and the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers broke down last week. Members of SAG-AFTRA have been on strike since July, disrupting TV and film production, which has left thousands of crew members and actors without work. Early this month, the Writers Guild, which had been striking in parallel, ratified a new 3-year contract with salary increases as well as better health benefits and pension funds. They were on strike for 148 days.
A famous breakdancer, George Kaminu, who is also known as Mushi Africa, dreams of making it to the Olympics one day. He says the lack of support from Kenyan government, which does not recognize it as a sport, is holding him and the community back.
In Nairobi, Kenya, breakdancing is taking off. Breakdancer Muzushi Africa was introduced to the art a decade ago and credits the dance for giving him direction.
For me, it was very appealing to the eye to see like some of the crazy moves these people are doing. And I remember at the time being like very interested, like I want to do this.
Muzushi Africa is now a pillar in Nairobi's breakdancing community. He says 10 years ago, little was known about breaking, which has since become recognized as an Olympic sport and will feature in the Paris 2024 Games. He now hosts workshops and events in hopes that more exposure will allow Kenya's breakdancers to make it to the Olympics one day. However, he says the challenges to pursuing this goal are many, and he attributes it to the lack of support from the Kenyan government.
You know, at the moment, breaking or breakdancing is in the Olympics. And, you know, that would have been a very nice spot, you know, for government to come in and start supporting the local breakdancing scene. But unfortunately, we do not have a dance sport federation, which is what is required in Kenya for you to get support from the National Olympic Committee. This was not a unique situation. There is actually, for all of Africa, only 8 countries have a federation out of 54.
Muzushi Africa has performed internationally, most recently in Taiwan, but he has to rely on sponsorships and donations to attend the competitions.
The art of breaking is yet to monetize, and so there is a lot of breakdancers who are really good at what they do, but they are yet to make an income or to get a revenue stream from breaking.
Still, the Kenyan breakdancing community is optimistic. Here's professional dancer Francis Mututri.
Since breaking has been recognized in the Olympics,
Now, a lot of people have hope. For now, I can say breaking it's going somewhere. We're heading somewhere.
Now let's take a look at the latest business and financial developments that have happened. Market reactions to the Israel-Hamas conflict have been relatively subdued, with the index suggesting investor confidence. Now, we need to keep an eye on the oil prices as a significant indicator. The upcoming flash manufacturing and service sector activity surveys might also introduce some uncertainty, while the ECB maintains its stance on monetary policy. Earning reports from Microsoft, Alphabet, Meta Platforms and the Amazon are expected this week. These companies, along with Apple, Nvidia and Tesla, have contributed to the S&P 500's 11% year-to-year growth and making their results crucial, in fact, to the entire market. Additionally, we'll be watching the third quarter GDP and the monthly personal consumption expenditures as well as the price index. And meanwhile, China's property market woes pose a threat to its 5% growth target, with investors closely monitoring the situation and the potential calls for further stimulus.
From escalating tension in the Middle East to China's property pain, these are the stories to watch in business and finance. Market reaction to the conflict between Israel and militant group Hamas has been relatively modest so far. Wall Street's so-called fear gauge, the VIX index, shows investors are not as nervous as they were when Russia invaded Ukraine last year. Oil is the barometer to watch. Flash manufacturing and service sector activity surveys in the coming days could add to uncertainty. The European Central Bank meets on Thursday. It will likely have one eye on the Middle East and the other on a weakening economy. The ECB says it's still quite some distance from easing monetary policy, but traders can expect a pause for now. Microsoft and Alphabet results are due on Tuesday, Meta Platforms on Wednesday, and Amazon on Thursday. Those stocks, along with Apple, Nvidia, and Tesla combined, have accounted for the bulk of the S&P 500's 11% year-to-date gain, so any results disappointment could have broad fallout. Third quarter GDP and the monthly personal consumption expenditures price index are also due. Property turmoil threatens China's 5% growth target, even after a consensus-smashing 4.9% quarterly expansion. That hasn't escaped investors who pushed mainland shares to a nearly one-year trough. A lot of what's happening is hidden from view, and pressure on Beijing for further stimulus is strong. Steps so far have disappointed.
In a significant development, the Indian Space Research Organization successfully launched the Gaganyaan's first flight test vehicle abort mission 1. Now TVD-1, as it is being named, aimed at demonstrating the crew escape system's performance. The mission represents a significant milestone in India's efforts to demonstrate that it is possible to send humans into space. The crew for this mission will be transported to the designated orbit using the LV-M3 rocket, equipped with various stages including solid, liquid and cryogenic propulsion systems. The test vehicle mission is the predecessor to the Gaganyaan program, which aims to send humans into space on a low Earth orbit at 400 kilometers for 3 days and bring them safely back to Earth. India will demonstrate its human spaceflight capabilities in a mission called the Gaganyaan launch in 2024. The country will set up a space station by 2035 and work on the Venus orbiter as well as the Mars lander. The TVD-1 initially was scheduled for liftoff at around 8 a.m. from the Satish Dhawan Space Center in Sriharikota. It faced an unexpected turn of events as the launch was called off just seconds before liftoff due to an anomaly. However, the launch was carried out successfully and it has resulted in the capsule being put at the desired orbit, after which the capsule landed back into the sea and has been recovered by the Navy's vessels that were located at the drop-off point. These are visuals of the parachutes from the capsule being open, and you can see 3 parachutes opening up and the visuals of it made available to ISRO. These are visuals coming in from the infrared as well as the UV cameras combined, and they show the capsule landing onto the Bay of Bengal at a designated site. ISRO is very happy with the launch as well as the recovery of the capsule that could be what could lead to the design for the Gaganyaan mission for carrying humans into space. Let's listen into the reactions coming in after the successful launch of this technology demonstrator and its recovery from ISRO scientists and its chairman.
I'm very happy to announce the successful accomplishment of the TVD-1 mission. The purpose of this mission was to demonstrate the crew escape system for the Gaganyaan program through a test vehicle demonstration, in which the vehicle has gone up to a Mach number, which is the speed of sound, slightly above that, and initiated an abort condition for the crew escape system to function. The crew escape system took the crew module away from the vehicle, and subsequent operations of the crew module separation from the crew escape system, all the parachutes opening, and touched down in the sea at the required velocity has been very well accomplished, and we have got confirmation of the data of all of this. And we will be further doing the approach recovery operations of the crew module to be collected from the sea, brought to the port by the ships. That activity will continue to happen. Till now, based on the data, everything has performed very nominally and perfect. I would also like to tell the reason for why we had a hold. We initially wanted the launch to happen at 8 o'clock in the morning, but there was some weather-related issues. We have rescheduled the launch to 8:45 a.m. But after going through the nominal liftoff process, there was a hold issued by the ground computer, which is called the automatic launch sequence computer, which detected a sort of a non-conformance for allowing the engine to continue the thrusting to further go. So this happened due to a monitoring anomaly in the system. So we could identify it very, very fast and correct it. And to make the stage ready, it took some time to refill the gases. And that once that has been completed, we went through the proper automatic launch sequence, which checked the entire health of the vehicle. And finally, the mission computer and the ground checkout computer authorized the launch to take off, which released the rocket from the launch pad, and subsequent activities of the flight as well as the post termination abort sequence also got executed perfectly. So I'm very happy that our team could understand in case of any anomaly how to rectify and come back fast. And congratulations to everybody.
Sir, this is like, never before attempt. It's a bouquet of 3 experiments put together, and we have now seen the fragrance and the characteristics of all 3 systems with what we wanted to test through this experiment or this mission. The test vehicle, the crew escape system, the crew module, everything I think we have perfectly demonstrated in the very first attempt, but for the initial hitch, but that's nothing a problem at all. All the systems performed well. I thank you for all the support provided by the entire team of ISRO across all centers of VSSC, LPSC, IPRC, IASU, SDSC, HSFC, etc. Thank you all, sir. It was a penance for us for the last 3-4 years, and then we have reached that D-Day today. And it was a very happy occasion that we could make it on the very first attempt. Thank you.
Well, there's been a significant market development. Tesla and other electric vehicle manufacturing companies suffered a sharp decline, especially on Thursday. What we understand is that Tesla, which is the world's highest valued automobile manufacturer, saw a staggering drop of around 9% when it comes to its shares. Now, this is because of the potential loss of around $70 billion in its market value. Now, this downturn comes days after Tesla CEO Elon Musk expressed concerns over the impact of high interest rates on consumer demand.
Shares of Tesla and other electric vehicle makers plummeted on Thursday, a day after Tesla CEO Elon Musk warned that high interest rates could sap consumer demand. The world's most valuable automaker sank more than 9% and was set to lose about $70 billion in market value. On a post-earnings call Wednesday, Musk said he wanted more clarity on the economy before ramping up a planned Tesla factory in Mexico. His concerns? High borrowing costs that could deter consumers and, quote, paycheck-to-paycheck pressures on American workers. The comments marked a change in tone from Musk, who last year said his company was, quote, recession resilient. The EV maker missed quarterly revenue estimates by the most in more than 3 years, despite hefty price cuts. Tesla is not the only EV maker worried about demand. General Motors this week said it would delay production by a year of its Chevrolet Silverado and GMC Sierra electric pickup trucks at a plant in Michigan. Ford last week said it would temporarily cut one of 3 shifts at a plant that builds its F-150 Lightning pickup trucks. The automaker in July already slowed its EV ramp-up, shifting investment to commercial vehicles and hybrids. And EV startup Lucid reported a near 30% plunge in third-quarter production this week, while Amazon-backed Rivian, which makes electric pickup trucks and SUVs, also disappointed investors this month when it shied away from raising its full-year production forecast. Shares of Lucid and Rivian were down roughly 3% and 4% respectively in Thursday afternoon trading.
Well, that's all in this edition of our News 9 special. Stay tuned to News 9 as we bring you news beyond the news, and that only on News 9. Stay tuned with us.
Delhi has the fastest growing metro network among G20 nations. From 6 stations in 2002, it today has 286 stations. Reliability, cleanliness and affordability have set the template for other